And that's like the most neurologically taxing thing that we can do is make decisions. And so then we're making decisions all day feeling like, man, it was just easier when I did this myself. I'm exhausted and I haven't gotten any of my own work done because I'm being interrupted all day.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Adrienne Dorison is an operational efficiency expert with over 15 years of experience helping businesses of all sizes become more efficient. She is Lean Six Sigma certified, a Scrum expert trainer, and a certified Smart Growth advisor. Adrienne co-founded Run Like Clockwork with author Mike Michalowicz, where they created the Clockwork program, a system designed to help entrepreneurs make their businesses self-sustaining. Through her work, you can learn practical strategies to streamline operations and reduce your own workload by implementing effective delegation and time management frameworks. So, Adrienne, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here too, especially because I know so much about the program. I've been in the program and I really wanted to have you on so you could share about it to help entrepreneurs, because my goal is really to help entrepreneurs be successful. And I know this is something that will truly help them. But before we get into the topic specifically, I want to ask you, with your background in operational efficiency, creating business systems, I would love to hear, like, how did you even decide you wanted to co-found Run Like Clockwork?
Yeah, so previously I was working in the corporate world and was doing efficiency at a really large scale for manufacturing organizations, corporations, and just felt like my values were becoming misaligned. Like I'm like an accidental entrepreneur. Like I never was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. It was just, as I started to look at the higher ups and my mentors in the corporate sector, I was like, this isn't actually what I want. And so I went out on my own and I started doing some consulting, but I was most interested in consulting with smaller businesses at that time and really trying to understand how they could benefit from the big business efficiency principles that big businesses they value so much. And I felt like small business owners, we hadn't even tapped into that. Like they didn't really even understand how valuable this could be for them. And so I started doing that on my own and built a practice for 3 or so years. And then Mike Michalowicz, my now partner, was writing a book on efficiency. He was trying to write a book on small business efficiency, and he was looking for someone who had like Lean Six Sigma experience, but was applying it to small business owners. And that was exactly what I was doing. And so we had a mutual contact who was like, you need to meet Adrienne. This is what she does. And so we connected, and he had intended to interview me, I think, just one time for the book. And then he kept calling me and texting me and asking me more questions. And through our, conversations, it became obvious that it was more than just one interview and that I could add even more value to the work. And that was a hard decision for me because I was running a very successful solo practice at the time. Like I had a team, but it was, I didn't need a business partner necessarily. And so when he asked me to be his partner in Clockwork, I had to really remove a lot of my ego and remind myself of like why I'm doing this. And it was really to help people. And if we could help more people under that brand and under that lens, then it made sense. And whenever I think about partnerships, like I never advise people to get into business partnerships unless it feels like a 1 + 1 = 11. And that felt true at the time with Mike, and it still feels true today. And we've had like a really good partnership and been able to work really well together. So it was sort of accidental. And, I think like you just follow what lights you up, and then certain things start to happen. So
Hmm. Well, I love that. I was an accidental entrepreneur too, so I totally understand, where you're
yeah.
coming from. And I think a lot of people who are listening probably are in that same boat too. Maybe they had a hobby that turned into a business, or out of a necessity, they got laid off or something, they had to start a
Mhm.
business. And so many of us do start businesses and are doing everything in the company because that's where we have to start. So I would love for you first to even just touch on the concept of us being the bottleneck in the business. We don't
Mhm.
always look at that. Things just come to us. And once we start building staff, even things still come to us, but
Yeah.
I would love for you to touch on that. And what are some of the things that, business owners can do to change being that bottleneck?
Yeah, so it's really natural, especially if you start your business just you solo, or even just like you and, a small amount of help, that you end up knowing enough about everything that everything, you could do everything, right? Like you wear all the hats in the business at first because that's the most logical thing. It's the most affordable thing when you're unable to hire people or you're not even making any money yet. So you learn how to do the customer support. You learn how to do the sales calls. You learn how to do the tech. Even if you're not that great at it, like you're just getting by enough to make it work. And so then once you max yourself out, right, we see this where people reach a capacity. They're like, I literally can't do any more work. I need to hire someone. So they hire someone thinking that that's going to make their lives much easier. But then they are the only ones, as the business owner, who hold a lot of the knowledge to be able to move things forward. And so that individual that you've hired now continues to come to you all day long. And we have these different work types that we talk about in Clockwork. We call it the 4Ds. And the first work type is the doing, right? So when you started your business, you were doing everything. And then when you hired that first person, they're able to start doing some things, but you still are responsible for making all of the decisions, right? The second D, deciding. So now they're coming to you all day long asking you, what should I do next? Or how do you want this done? Or where's the information for this thing that I need to do? And that's like the most neurologically taxing thing that we can do, is make decisions. And so then we're making decisions all day feeling like, man, it was just easier when I did this myself. I'm exhausted and I haven't gotten any of my own work done because I'm being interrupted all day. And so you can think about this as a bottleneck to the growth, because if everything has to run through you, everything goes much slower, right? Like there is no way for the people on your team to operate at a higher speed if you are involved in every single decision or every single action or every single next step, or they can't move things forward autonomously because they just don't have the information and the knowledge or the permission to do those things. And so you kind of get trapped in that cycle, which can create big bottlenecks for the business in terms of its growth. It usually creates a lot of frustration for you because you don't want to be making those decisions all day. And you may even be getting frustrated with the team because you're like, why can't they just do this themselves? Like, why do they keep asking me? Like, I just need people that are more proactive. And I'm like, I hear you, and you're not giving them the tools to be able to do those things, right? It's not that that's not in their character or in their nature. It's like they are unable by nature of the culture or the structure or the lack of systems that you have in place. So the first thing that we typically advise people to do is a time tracking, which is not the most fun thing to do, but it is the most data-driven activity that we can do to start understanding where you are the bottleneck and where there are opportunities to fully delegate things off your plate. So that's our third D in our 4D system, right? So we have either you're doing all the work, then you may level up to someone else is doing some of the work, but you're making all the decisions. Third level is now we're delegating. And when you're delegating, that means that they now own the decisions around those areas of responsibility, right? So we're assigning outcomes to people instead of just assigning tasks. And so once we have a time tracking, so we typically have our clients do a time study for 3 to 5 days. We want them to track everything that's kind of happening throughout their day, all the things that they're doing, all the decisions that are coming through to them, so that we can start delegating some of those things more effectively, right? If we don't know what decisions are coming to your plate, then we don't really know how to delegate something because we're unclear on what knowledge is actually missing. So it's a really important piece of the process of removing you as the bottleneck to a lot of the, decisions and actions and projects in the business.
Well, and I agree. I told my staff when, I read Clockwork, I heard about it and I was like, okay, I need to implement this in the business. Then I found out about the accelerator program and I was like, okay, I definitely need this, because I told them I am the bottleneck in my own company too. And if something were to happen to me, or I can't work for a reason, or a family emergency or what happens, I don't want the business to fall apart.
Yeah.
And so we did start doing this. We have time tracked in our own company a few times. And yes, it's not a favorite thing, that people have to do and write all the details, but it can be very eye-opening as well too. And like you said, having to track, even as the owner too, what am I doing? Where am I deciding? And often you see like, gosh, I'm spending a lot more time in a category that I didn't think I was, right? And then what can we do to make those changes? And so I've been able to implement a lot of the information that you've taught in my own company as well, and understanding those D's and, and then you have the T's, where I would love for you to talk about, like, okay, so someone now time tracks and they look at the work that they're doing and deciding, doing, delegating, and then of course we have the dream part of it where we can do the strategy, and that's where we really want to be designing the company. But how do they then look at, okay, now I've time tracked, how do I start to get things off my plate so I'm not the bottleneck?
Yeah. So like you said, that fourth D is the designing, right? Which we call like the creating of the future of the business, right? Like that's the strategy element, the dreaming, the visionary pieces. And like you were talking about, a lot of times when we do our time tracking, we don't even realize we're spending time in all the wrong places, right? So you might recognize, oh my gosh, I'm doing a lot of things that I shouldn't be doing, right? Or I'm doing this in a lot greater proportions. Like maybe my doing is like 30 hours a week, when really we want a lot of our CEOs to be spending a good chunk of their time in that designing every single week. And it usually gets put to the back burner. And so once we have that data of like, how much of your time is spent in the doing, and how much is spent in the deciding, and how much is spent in the delegating, and how much is spent in the designing, then we want to go through each of those activities and ask ourselves, okay, now how could we shift this to make this activity more valuable for the business? So there's 3 to 4, we added a fourth, 4 things you can do with your time. So the first thing you can do with an activity, as you go down the list, you can decide, is this something we could just trash, right? So they're all going to start with T just to make it easier for you. So when we say trash, we don't mean someone else gets it. We mean the entire business is just going to stop doing it, right? And a lot of times there are things that are on our plates or happening in our business that we just continue to do because we've always done them, right? Like, and we don't really know if those things are adding value to the business. We may just be a little bit nervous to let them go because we're like, I don't know, I've done it forever. Like what's going to happen if I stop? And I'm like, well, let's attach a metric to it. And if we can't attach a metric to it, then maybe it's not that valuable to begin with. And it's just, feeding our anxiety of like, oh, I just keep doing this because I've always done it, right? So you could trash anything. I'll give you some examples. Like we've had clients trash entire revenue streams. We've trashed entire revenue streams where we're like, you know what? Like, I don't think this actually makes sense for the vision or for the growth of the company. Like it's maybe just something we've always offered, but it's maybe not something we need to continue to offer that aligns with the goals for where we're going. And those can be hard decisions, but a lot of times they're the right decisions to be able to move and propel the business forward. Sometimes it's like a social media channel where you're like, oh, we just post there, but like we actually, when we look at the data, we're not getting any clients from there or customers or value from the posting. It's just something that we thought we had to do. So we kept doing it. And it's like, well, that's taking up time that maybe could go towards something else. It could be something as small as a meeting that's ended up on your calendar and it started as something that was valuable or timely. Maybe it was based around a specific project. And then it just kind of stayed as like a standing meeting. And now it's not that valuable. And maybe we could just trash it. So I want you to think through each of the activities and identify, like, can I just trash any of these things? Because now we can take that time and spend it in a more valuable place, which is the whole goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the second T is what we call trim. And trimming is all about just utilizing constraints and your time better, right? So Parkinson's law states that a task will expand or contract with the amount of time that we give it. And so are there things that maybe are taking you longer than they need to because we're just giving them more time? So if you give yourself, an unlimited amount of time to work on a project, it's going to take you way longer than if you give yourself 2 hours to work on that project, right? So giving yourself more natural constraints is actually going to help you recoup some of that time so you can spend it in more valuable places. So I typically look for things that I procrastinate on, or that I'm a perfectionist around, or that I tend to overthink on, and I'll try to shrink the amount of time that I give those things. So for example, if I'm writing marketing emails for the business, like sometimes I still do that because I like doing it and I'm good at it. So I'm like, I'm going to do that activity. But it could take me a lot longer if I just give myself all afternoon to write one marketing email versus if I say, hey, you got 30 minutes to do this and I'm going to make it happen before I get on that call with Candy, right? So I like to back things up to things that I can't move, right? Like I had this call at 11. And so 10:30, I'm starting writing an email, and you better believe it's going to be done by the time I need to hop on this call. And so if you can do that to yourself in your business, you're going to recoup time and be more efficient with the things that you're doing. I also always recommend for people to trim meetings. Most of the time, meetings are just scheduled for an hour, even 30 minutes, just because that's what you've always done, or you thought it had to be an hour. Chop it in half, chop every single meeting in half, and see how much more efficient you can be on those meetings. And then you'll recoup that time, and you can choose how do you want to spend that time in more valuable places. The third T is what we call transfer, right? So then you're looking at your activities for, okay, this still needs to be done, right? So I can't trash it, but does it really need to be done by me? Like, is this working in my highest value? Is this something that I should really be doing? So for example, when you first started your business, you did everything because you kind of had to, but that doesn't mean that you're actually well suited for all of those activities. There are certain things that drain your energy, that like your natural strengths are not really well aligned with, that frustrate you. And so then they'll end up taking even longer, which is super inefficient to the business. Or even like you may even do them fairly well, but if you could use that time to do something that's more valuable for the business that only you can do, then that's actually the better, more valuable choice, right? So I could respond to customer support emails, but maybe I'm also the best person on sales calls. And so it's like, well, the sales calls is actually a more valuable activity for me to be doing, whereas the customer support is just something I can do, but I probably shouldn't. So that's an example of like how you want to start thinking about, are these activities that really are most important and most valuable for me to be doing, or should I transfer them to someone else? Like I can do the customer support, but number one, I'm terrible at it. It drains my energy. It ruins my energy for the rest of the day. Like if I have complaints or tech things that I have to solve and fix, now I can't do any of the creative work that really is highest value for me to be doing for the business because I'm so in a bad mood now after I did the customer support thing. So it's like, it's not just wasting the hour that I am actually sending out the emails. It's really just made my whole day shot in terms of the higher value things that I should be spending my time on. And so you really want to think about that as you look through your activities. And then the fourth T that we added is the treasure. And so treasure is really those highest value activities. You're looking for those and really trying to figure out, if I start trashing, trimming, and transferring, how can I actually spend more time on the things that I treasure and really that the business treasures me doing, because those are the highest value activities. And that goes across the board, not just for you as the business owner, but also for your team. Like, this is a really great retention strategy, is quarter over quarter, I'm constantly looking for my team's treasured time and treasured activities to be increasing, right? Because I want them to be working on things that are highest value for the business, but also things that they love doing and are aligned with their strengths. And, if I can communicate that, like, hey, let's grow the things that you love doing so that we can actually create a dream role for you here, that's something that usually keeps people around for a lot longer. So a dual purpose activity there.
Well, and this is so important to the whole clockworking program, right? And figuring out, again, where your time is going, where it shouldn't be, what can you delegate? I actually created a training on this specifically to do a deeper dive. So I'll actually link to that training in the show notes for this too. But now, so if someone identifies then like, okay, I have some tasks I can transfer, but I don't really know how to effectively delegate that to them. Can you give them some tips on what they should be doing?
Yeah. So with delegation, you want to remember that you're not just assigning a task to someone else. You're trying to assign an outcome to someone else, right? So most of the time, this is where we fail right out the gate, because we have not even identified what the outcome is. And so then we're frustrated with someone else who can't operate more autonomously, but it's like, they don't even know where they're going, right? Like, because we don't even know where they're going. And so making sure the first thing that you understand is like, did I really delegate the outcome to someone? I always recommend that you start small with your delegation, because delegation is like a muscle, right? If you're not good at it right now, or if that muscle is not strong, it's not going to go well. And then you're going to get hurt. You're going to break trust. It's going to send the signal that like, see, I knew I just had to do it myself. And like, that's not the neural pathway that we're trying to build. Like, we're really trying to make sure that this goes well so that you can build trust in these team members. You can build confidence, and they can build confidence in starting to like be more autonomous. And you can start to say, oh, like, look, someone can do that for me, versus the alternative of, trying to delegate something that's really high stakes. So I say, start like low stakes, even if it feels silly. Like, sometimes people are like, this is such a silly thing for me to like go through the process of delegating. I'm like, yeah, but you need to learn how to delegate. And so you have to go through that process with some easy things, or things that seem easy, so that you can work through the kinks in a really low stakes environment. Things that are not super close to the money, not super close to the clients. If those are things that even start to give you anxiety, like if they messed it up, how would you feel, right? Because they are going to make mistakes, because they're learning, and we have to give them the opportunity to make mistakes, because that's how people learn. We usually find our biggest lessons in the mistakes that we made, right? But then we're unwilling to let our team members do that. And so it's like, okay, we got to let them do that, but give them a low stakes environment to do it within. I also say to start with things that are easy to capture, right? And that they can be like fully autonomous with pretty quickly, because then that'll also get something off your plate. It'll help them to feel valuable to the business, because if you've ever been an employee in a business, or, worked for anyone else, like, the most disempowering thing is not being able to add any value or to do anything on your own. It's like when I constantly have to go ask my manager, or like, oh, I need permission for this, or I don't even know what to do next because no one tells me, because they don't trust me. Like, those are things that make people feel less good about their job and less valuable in their role. And so it's like, get them autonomous pretty quickly. So the three things that we always recommend you communicate when you are starting to delegate is, number one, what information will they need to be successful, right? Like, there might be some information in a Google Doc that there are 47 versions of, that they don't know which one to use today because you've never told them. It may be something that lives in your brain, in your head. And this is the biggest part of clockworking, I think, is transferring a lot of information out of your head, just because you've always done it yourself and you've never had to write it down, or you've never had to think through, why do I make that decision in that way? right? So you're going to have to slow down and transfer some information out of your head so that they can effectively do the job. But that's really long-term thinking versus being really short-sighted, which is really important for you as a CEO. Like, yes, it's going to take you a little bit longer to get this information out of your head versus just doing it yourself or making the decision. But then you will never have to make the decision again, right? And you will never have to do this task again. And so you're starting to recoup the compound interest of the delegation over time, right? So first, what information do they need? Second, what permission do they need to be able to make decisions and move things forward? A lot of times we fail to give them any permission, and then they think they need to come back to us to say, can I do this? Or is this approved? Or, do you want me to do it this way? Or do you want to make this decision? And that is the trap of getting caught in that deciding. They think they're moving something forward, but now you're still making all the decisions. And so we need to be really clear with them of like, hey, I want you to make all the decisions related to this project to get to that outcome. Or I want you to make all the decisions except for these two, because I'm still working on how to transfer that information to you, right? So the end goal is always still going to be, eventually they have all the permission to make all the decisions, but you may still be working on some of that information transfer. So what permissions do they have so that they can operate a little bit more quickly with less bottlenecks, moving things forward? And then the third, like I talked about earlier, is the outcome. Where are we even going? How do they know when they've been successful? How do they know when this is complete? How do they know when they've done a good job? Good team members, A players, can get like 85% of the way there with just an outcome. But a lot of times we fail to do that, and that can really set people back. So think about whenever you're delegating anything, am I handing over information that they need, the permission that they need, and the outcome that they need? And if you do all those three things, your delegation is going to be much more successful, and you're going to get them to be much more autonomous, much more quickly.
Right. Well, and I think too, like you said, there's so much information that we often have in our heads, and, getting that down and remembering all of the things that have to happen. Because as you're writing things down, then you might skip some things because it's just like second nature to you. But if you skip it, it's harder for them too. So I know having like where you can record yourself doing it too, so you don't skip any steps. I know that's really helpful too. And so, obviously there's various ways that they could jot down the information, but like I said, getting it from your head to where they can actually follow it, and then giving them that permission and knowing, yes, someone's going to make a mistake periodically, and being okay with that and giving them opportunity. Because when we first started, we made mistakes too, but we don't always think about that. We just think like, well, I would have done it better.
Right. You would have done it better now because you've had a lot of practice, but you got to give them the opportunity to practice and to learn and to figure things out on their own, because they also might figure out a better way to do things. And by giving them that freedom, they're going to have a lot more ownership over the process, and they're going to care a lot more. A lot of times business owners, talk about how like no one cares as much as me about the business. And I'm like, well, because you're micromanaging everything. You're not giving them any autonomy. So why would they care about it? They have no autonomy to make decisions or to add value. And so like they have no emotional attachment to it. But if you can let them be more autonomous and give them ownership over, like, if you find a better way to do it, or if there's a better way to do this process, like go for it, right? As long as we're hitting the same outcome still, or even better outcomes, then like, I want you to feel like you can change things and you can do things better. And a lot of times we're so scared to let them play a little bit, but that's how they end up caring a lot more.
Right. Well, and I think sometimes they're afraid to make the mistakes too. So then they don't want to like step out of their comfort zone too. So I think we just had to balance that too, right? Like, yes, it might be a little bit scary for both sides, but in the long run, we need to think about what's going to be best for the business, right? Because once again, if something were to happen to the owner, what's going to happen to the business, right? Whether it's a temporary thing or a longer term thing, we want to think about what could happen, to our staff or our company if we can't be there to do what we need to do, right?
Yeah. And the idea of Clockwork is that if something happens to you as the business owner, like the business keeps running, right? And nothing's going to skip a beat, because you are not the bottleneck to any singular decision, project, client work. Like all of those things can operate without you and without any individual one person. Sometimes
Right.
we transfer the bottleneck to like our number two or to,
Right.
and it's like, well, that's not helpful either because they may also get sick or need to step
Mhm.
out or whatever it might be. And so leaning on processes and systems and that transfer of knowledge and, making sure that anyone can step in and do those things when we might need them to. So
Exactly. Well, this has been a fabulous discussion. I know we're just barely scratching the surface of everything that we could talk about in this area, but I know we're
yeah.
coming close to the end of the time we have together. So I wanted to ask if you have an offer that you would like to share with our listeners, and also how can people connect with you if they want more information?
Yeah, so we have a free book club that we recorded and put together some guides and things that will walk you through the book as you're reading. So if you go to runlikeclockwork.com/book club, you can get free access to that book club and all those resources. I always recommend, if you haven't read the book yet, that's like a great place to start, right? It's going to help you understand if this is kind of the position that you are in right now. If things need a little bit more clockworking, then book club. And then if you need more support, you can work with someone like Candy, who's one of our certified partners, on implementing this fully into your business and getting you all the way to what we call the 4-week vacation, which is you unplugging for 4 weeks from the business while the business continues to run. And like, we've helped thousands of clients do that. And so if you're like, oh my gosh, I could never do that, I'm like, yes, you can. You just need to start. And the book is the best place. So you can go to runlikeclockwork.com/book club. You can connect with me. Like runlikeclockwork.com has all of our, programs, resources. My social media is at Adrienne Dorison. I post just, fun stuff on my socials as well. If you're interested in connecting, I would love to connect with you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Adrienne, for being a guest on my show and talking about this topic. I really wanted to have you on too, because again, having read the book, gone through the program, now, became certified partner as well. Like, I know how effective this program can be, and it can really help entrepreneurs. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And to the listener, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And if you want to hear additional information, you can find access to exclusive content in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guests and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.